This is the April 18th meeting of the Shelburne Development Review Board. Welcome. Okay, so the first item on our agenda then is public comment. So invite anybody to make any comment on items that are not included in the agenda. No takers. I always like how we allow 5 minutes for the public comment and 5 minutes for me to call the meeting to order. I know. All right, so then item 3 on the agenda is approval of the minutes from our April 4th, 2018 meeting. And actually, before we do that, okay, so I need to get into the habit of doing these things up front. Anybody who's here who's going to give evidence or on any of the things that are on the agenda must sign in so that we know that you were here. And do any members of the board have any conflicts of interest on any items on there tonight?
I do on item 6. I'll be recusing myself.
Okay, the rice lumber, yeah. All right. Having remembered to do both those things, then we will move on to item 3, which is the approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any comments or corrections?
I didn't see any.
Because I have one. On page 8, there's a list of items that were discussed under the Clint West's application. And under access, it says the applicant will get a letter from VTrans regarding the right-of-way. I'm thinking that means the Palmer Court Homeowners Association.
Yeah, I don't think we requested anything from VTrans.
No, I think it was mentioned, but I don't think
It was
that
mentioned,
a
but it wasn't a
Yeah.
requirement.
That's a good catch.
So, yeah, I think you're right. So we need to change the access bullet needs to be changed from VTrans to from the Palmer Court. Is there a homeowners association there? Must be.
Yeah. Did you get that, Caitlin?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so then I will make a motion to approve those minutes with that suggested correction. Thank you. That was seconded by Ian. All those in favour?
Aye.
Okay. That done. Okay, so then we will move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is our design review applications. The first one is application DR 18-05. This is an application from Michael and Michelle Noonan in relation to 1138 Falls Road. The applicant seeks design review approval for new siding, windows and doors, and in addition to the rear of the property, a new entry porch and a new roof overhang over an entrance door. Is there anybody in the audience who is here to speak to this? Okay. Stand up, come forwards. So I will have to swear in anybody who's going to give evidence. So if you would raise your right hands, and do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give in this matter will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. All right, so whoever's going to start, just introduce yourself, stand near the microphone, and
Michelle Noonan, and my husband Mike Noonan. And am I just supposed to tell you, explain the project or what we're doing, or?
I don't know, I mean, you can give us an overview, or if people on the board think it's obvious and have questions, we can do it that way.
Okay, so we were looking to put an addition onto the house. So been working with the Historic Design Review Board, so that addition, because of where we are in the district and easements or whatever, the right of way on the house. So we're putting an addition on the back, putting new siding, new windows. There is a change to the front of the house, but we are putting a new overhang over the lower front door. And it's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
So Caitlin, I see that there is a recommendation of approval from the Historic Preservation and Design Review Committee. Did you have anything to add?
No, I don't have any comments.
Nope, okay.
Hold on. So,
Yes.
so I notice there's a 15-foot setback from the property line, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and is that a deck on the bottom that you have to kind of like put the diagonal across to? Okay, to go this. So I don't, and that's a new deck?
Yep.
Okay. And that is not in any of these pictorials.
It's just hard to see on the back side of the house or
Okay.
the south side.
All right, and is that at ground level or is that above ground?
Above ground.
You can see it on the last sheet,
Oh, got it, okay.
the back of the.
Okay, thank you.
Make a motion to approve the grant design review approval to Mark and Michelle Noon for new siding, windows, and doors. In addition, on a new entry porch and a new roof overhang at 1138 Falls Road is depicted on the elevations dated April 1, 2018, with the one condition that they obtain a zoning permit prior to commencement of construction.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to application DR 18-07, which is an application by J. Pricer and Margaret Cohn for a mudroom extension, chimney work, new skylights, window replacement, and new fencing for their property at 270 Bacon Drive. Is there anybody here for this application? Yes, there is. Okay. So raise your right hand, please. And we'll swear you in if you raise your right hand.
Yes.
Thank you. So do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give to us in this matter will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Okay. Again, do you want to give us an overview?
Sure.
Just to repeat your name because you
Jay
were...
Pricer.
Okay. Thank you.
This is, we had actually gotten a permit in end of 2012 for most of this same work, and that permit expired. Time and money, things took longer time, so we had not done the fence and the mudroom addition and a few other things that were on the original permit. So this is a reapplication for those things that we had applied for before, with a few minor changes for windows on a room that's at the very back from what the original application was. So of the 8 or 9 items we listed on the front page for, excuse me, we're applying for, most of those are from the original application and noted with 2012 next to them.
Questions from the board? Caitlin, did you have anything?
No, I have no comments.
Okay. Okay, nothing? Okay, then I will make a motion to grant design review approval to J. Pricer and Margaret Cohn for the proposed renovations and replacement fence at 270 Bacon Drive as depicted on the elevations received April 6th, 2018, with the one condition that a zoning permit will be required prior to the commencement of construction. Seconded by Ian. Thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. All
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. We're a little ahead. Item 5 on the agenda is application FBZ 17-01, which was continued from our previous meeting. And this is an application by Civil Engineering Associates on behalf of Clint West for final plan, conditional use and site plan review. I'm not going to read all of this. The property is at 2916 Shelburne Road, and last time we were here, we had asked for a couple more matters to be addressed, and I see from the staff report that we do have a letter from the Palmer Courts Road Association and a new lighting plan. Clint, did you want to come forward and update us? I should swear you in again. Do you swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give in this matter will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Okay. I see that you did, as we discussed last time, you have a letter. Okay, let's show us the letter again, please.
Sure.
Wasn't in my packet at least.
Yeah, I don't think it was.
Okay.
Seems straightforward.
It does, yeah. And the lighting plan, so, let's see.
Looks much better.
Caitlin, did you have anything on the lighting plan?
No, I think it looks good. I had some general staff comments, more just contemplative than anything being an issue. So I would just take some time to review the cut sheets that he provided, and if you have any questions about the staff report, happy to answer them.
I'm trying to think back when we were talking about this last, other than lighting, were there any other major concerns that we had?
I think from the previous session, the concerns were not enough lighting in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So we asked that he come back with a plan, which I reviewed, and it seems to be in conformance to requirements.
Anything else?
I think we picked up pretty well.
I don't think there was anything else. Okay.
The comment, Caitlin, that comments have not been solicited from the Public Works departments, is that out of date now? I should have brought my notes from the last meeting.
Which section?
Section 970.3. There's just still a comment there.
970.
Yeah.
0.3. I have that as drainage structures.
Yeah, drainage structure to accommodate development upstream. There's still a staff comment there that says comments haven't been solicited from the Public Works departments.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yep. No, it's all good. I just forgot to take the staff comment out, but
Okay.
we're checked.
We did talk about the parking.
We did.
And
Yes.
I don't know if we needed to document any of our findings. In other words, there was a variance that was required, and it was within our purview to do that.
Yeah.
Yep, we had to give them a waiver.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Does that need to be documented in our?
Did we do that last
I
time?
thought we,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
I
what
thought that we
Yeah. I
had,
thought it
just
was
in
one
our
of the conditions.
discussion, but.
It wasn't. Well, it was an approval that we have to give.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Later on in here, so it says on 1.6.2 that parking calculations or requests for a waiver were not provided, but then later on, it says that it was, and we did have it.
I just want to make sure that the applicant doesn't get into trouble a year from now.
Right.
Where it wasn't clear documented that we approved it. Caitlin, you have any comment to that?
I think to play it safe, you should make a motion to grant a waiver at this hearing, even if it was discussed and decided at the last. As part of the final plan motion, I would add that you're granting a waiver for the parking as requested.
And that was, I think it was for 19 spots. Do you remember? They hate just to have a general waiver. I usually like to say to a specific number. Where's the applicant? Where is he? Do you remember what the number was? What did you have in your?
There were 12 for the residential.
Right.
I'm gonna look
Yeah,
at
I think
my letter. I have a letter that,
Yeah, there was a letter in the last staff report.
Yeah.
Six for whatever the number is. Yeah.
it's gonna take me a minute.
We're here to help.
But Caitlin, should that, the comment on 1.6, whatever it was, 16.3, or 1.6.2, be removed?
Yeah, so I got the parking waiver request after the week deadline, the
Okay.
week prior deadline. So that's why the staff report isn't all the way up to date. But he did ask for a waiver request. The kind of tricky part about it is that we have like the base calculations, but because it's not necessarily a use that's specifically laid out in the parking section requirements, it's kind of up to you to determine the amount of parking necessary. So we don't have an exact number for the waiver because first we have to establish what would be required for the use. So there's 2 parking spaces per residential unit.
Right.
That's clear.
Yep.
But on the bottom floor, it's not really retail, it's not really personal service, so it's up to you to decide what would be necessary.
There was no, the use was unclear, and I think you had used office, if I'm not
I think I used
mistaken.
like a personal service area, office, retail space, so it would be a much higher count than Clint would be using. But if you wanted to use that as your baseline,
So,
you could go off of there, or you could just establish that what he's proposing is adequate.
How about if we just make a motion granting them a waiver for the parking, the number of parking spaces on the plan?
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Sure.
What do you have, Clint?
That works.
Do you have the
Yeah.
paperwork?
yeah, that makes sense. We have 20 parking spaces, and then, like Caitlin said, the base calculation to even figure out how many I need is, but there's up to the 50% waiver that was more than adequate, so.
Okay.
Oh, they're there.
2, 9, 4,
Do you have a clear
13.
picture of that?
19, it's hard to tell on this one.
Yep.
So that's a separate motion, Caitlin?
20.
Yeah, I would do that as a separate motion.
Okay.
Is this one 20?
I'll take a crack at it. I'll make a motion to grant the applicant an allowed use of 20 parking spaces as depicted on his plan
Second.
for this site.
Yeah.
Being seconded by Jeff. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
So I also then would make a motion to close the hearing and finalize the record and indicate approval and direct staff to prepare a decision indicating approval of this application with the 6 conditions as noted on the staff report, with the addition of permit will not be granted unless they have the letter of the right-of-way letter and permission to use the Palmer Court right-of-way. Oh, you do have that?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind, scratch that. The six conditions per the staff report.
Second.
Okay.
Seconded by Jeff. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Which brings us to item 6.
I've got to
Which
go.
means Mark is out of here temporarily. Okay. Item 6 on the agenda is application SP 17094R2. It's an application by Civil Engineering Associates on behalf of Rice Lumber Company for an amendment to a previously approved site plan. The proposal includes the revision to an approved landscaping plan. The property is at 4188 Shelburne Road and is located in the mixed-use district and the stormwater overlay district. And we're a little ahead, but is there somebody here to speak to this application? Yes, there is. Okay.
Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates.
Okay, raise your right hand. And do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give in this matter will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. All right.
I didn't touch it.
Okay. Give us a
So
summary.
the background here is that the Rice Lumber redevelopment project is subject to an existing landscaping plan and conditions of approval associated with that. And this particular application seeks to improve upon that original design. The original design kind of used a carpet bombing type of approach as far as just plastering the hillside with evergreens. And what we found as the site developed, that there were opportunities to improve the screening by utilizing larger trees at critical locations. So as you're looking at it from Route 7 up into the site, I don't know if you can look at it in your mind's eye as you've driven by, but under existing conditions, some of the plateau that surrounds the two buildings actually creates a de facto kind of brow or edge of the hill. And what we'd like to do is take some of the the placement of larger evergreen trees along that edge to again maximize the screening opportunities earlier on in the project. Now, if we wait long enough, all of the carpet bombing trees would have grown and appropriately provided screening, but we were looking to try to improve upon that in regards to this particular plan. Now, the value of this plan is slightly more than that was included in the original one. Things that we've also proposed as part of the application is as you're driving south on Route 7, and you happen to be looking right, no, your passenger happens to be looking right. What we wanted to do is do two things. One thing that struck us was that the trees planted along Route 7 actually were in great condition. As you head in the southerly direction past the Jelly Mill, I'm dating myself, now it's Shelburne Commons. But then as you get towards the Rice Lumber property and then about halfway down through it, they just disappeared. So what we wanted to do is try to reinforce that, that treescape component. And then the other component that we noticed is, again, as you're heading south on Route 7 and your eye comes to the right as soon as you get past the existing residential home, that's as part of the Rice Lumber project. And you look up, well, you can stop right there, Kate, if you can go back. You know, this is one of those view sheds looking up this way. You can't see it very well, but the driveway comes up and turns and heads right up. And this is the area that we said, gee, you know, that's just something that the eye immediately draws itself to. So what we wanted to do along the edge of the roadway is place some evergreen trees there also. Again, not the short ones, but the more mature ones that would basically provide that initial level of screening that otherwise would be missing as part of the landscaping plan. So when we go back and look at the landscaping plan, one of the questions that staff put forward was, well, what's your EPSE plan? Well, our EPSE plan is exactly as it was approved previously, both by the town as well as by the state. We're not changing the limits of disturbance. We're basically just reorganizing and choosing to use larger trees at locations that otherwise were always going to be stabilized either with grass or trees. Another feature of this particular plan is, Kate, if you can go to the site plan.
Oops. The landscaping plan or the actual site plan?
The landscaping plan's fine. So embedded right in here is a retaining wall. And one of the benefits of putting this particular retaining wall in is that it extends out the plateau. This is what we call the retail building. This is the drive-through. We'll call it the lumber building. And one of the things that it does here is when we talked about kind of looking out on the shoulder of the site around the buildings is, again, as you're looking up from Route 7, whether it be along the roadway or this longer view in the southwesterly direction, it basically brings the trees out and closer to you so that, as you know, we're going to get better screening opportunities than if these trees were tucked back here. So this particular wall is actually almost, well, is a landscaping feature in the fact that we've got not only this wall that kind of celebrates and will kind of identify, this is going to be a dry laid stone wall. So it's going to be one of those things that celebrates all the activity that went out on this particular property in regards to rock management. But at the same time, it also provides that secondary benefit of being able to put some trees, again, a little bit closer to Route 7, again, at a higher elevation to provide that screening as you look up at the buildings. So, and I'm trying to think what else. Kate, what other highlights do we have from the staff report? Sorry.
No problem. Let me just switch screens here.
Are you just thinking, Kate, or you're...
I'm through all the comments to see what Dave didn't hit
So
on.
towards the very end on page 6, well, Kate, you keep looking on lighting. The proposed landscaping isn't intended to change any of the site lighting that originally was done before. So we had always had, you know, trees along these particular areas, and these still remain from what was currently the approved plan. We basically have a little bit of lighting along here, but again, those particular trees are set on the opposite side of the lighting. So we don't see any issue in regards to conflicts between landscaping and lighting in this particular case. We do see it on other applications, but not here.
So two of the comments, if you go to 1900.5A2, landscaping plans shall be prepared by a landscape architect, master gardener, etc. Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but CEA prepared these plans?
That is correct. We took some of the concepts from the original plan done by Distinctive Landscaping, but chose to improve upon it ourselves. So that is correct.
So Distinctive, their names on the plan, did they not do the planting?
They didn't do this particular plan.
Did they do the previous one?
Yes,
Oh, really?
yes.
Huh.
Okay.
So, are we satisfied with who's prepared the plans? Dave is a professional engineer, not a landscape architect or a gardener or anything like that. So if you feel comfortable with it, that's fine, but it was a comment.
No, I think I would like to see at least some comment or opinions from a landscape architect on this. I've flipped back and forth on these drawings a couple of times, well, several times, and I can't quite visualize it. So if we could get maybe some better visualization, and I know there's a lot of nice virtual software out there that might be able to help with something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be
Okay.
important. Engineers make great engineers, and landscape architects are great for landscaping architects. And
I mean, I will comment that it is an improvement. I remember being a little disappointed in the original one. I'm surprised to hear that Distinctive did that. I think there's a better variety and mixture of quantities and sizes and things, but
I'm having a hard time with the retaining wall and trying to visualize what that's going to look like. What's that going to be constructed of? Is from the spoils from the site?
yeah, is that a boulder wall or is it?
A dry laid boulder wall.
Okay, so not really I mean, it's a stone wall, but not like a tight stone wall. It's a big boulder.
I think, Jeff, yes, that is correct.
Okay. And Dave, I have a question. There seems to be a boulder wall right at the entrance drive.
Temporary
Is
in
that
nature.
temporary?
Yes.
Okay.
So what they tried to do was, they had, long story short, it's temporary,
Yeah.
in support of allowing a temporary access to
Okay.
work through ultimately a fill area. So to describe it, right now, there's a temporary access road that comes in off of here and down into Route 7. So this is the historical approved curb cut from VTrans.
Okay.
And while they're constructing this, they still wanted access into the site. But at
Okay.
the same time, this area was going to be receiving fill from the rock work. And in order to maintain the access, they actually created these temporary retaining walls. Fairly good looking for a temporary facility. But they are temporary.
I think, yeah, my concern, it just seemed like there's still so much stone on site. I didn't know, I'm assuming that you're not going to see like stone all over the ground when it's done, or?
That's the intent.
Okay.
Yes.
Because, I mean, there's
No, I mean-
areas where you show riprap, but other than that, it seems, right now, it just looks like a stone yard.
It's a lot of stone.
Yeah.
The intent is to basically make it green
Yeah,
as part of the stabilization plan.
okay.
Yes.
So as far as staff comments, I think this might be addressed if we do some more visualization. Is how much is visible from adjoining property owners? And
So Kate, is this a
That-
new, is this something?
1900.5 B3.
So I guess our position is that it's a much better plan as far as the ability to screen the buildings than what is currently approved. So now the question is what was the standard at the time of the original approval? And at what point do you expect to have all but 1/4 of the building screened? Is it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 40 years from now? So what we've tried to do is accelerate the ability to basically create the screening on this particular property by upsizing the trees and positioning them in more critical locations. So that's our position. We think it's a much better plan. It's much, well, I should say it's much, if the earlier plan was compliant, this one is even more compliant.
It sounds as if you agree with that.
I mean, I agree as far as the mixture of trees and sizes. I noticed you did add in one kind of non-native evergreen, which I just have a personal problem
There you
with,
go.
which is hard not to, the Colorado blue spruce. But
We would have hired you, Jeff, but we didn't want to basically have you missing tonight, so.
I mean, I don't need to see a visual. I mean, I'm able to visualize this, but for me, it would be really nice to have somebody just comment, because I also know, like Princeton Elms, they're starting to get Dutch elm disease.
No,
and
it's a good point. A different
So-
cultivar would be better there.
It would be nice, like even if Charlie or somebody could just review it and, you know, kind of make some tweaks like that. That's my only concern. Oh, I'm sorry, distinctive land
Yeah, I
same.
mean, I was kind of a little confused because the comment said Civil Engineering Associates did this, but I still saw as distinctive landscaping.
Yeah, it's still on
Title
the
block.
title block.
And I get to be kind of a
And-
stickler because 1900.5A2 says landscaping plans shall be prepared by a landscape architect, so,
Or master gardener, or,
or,
yeah.
you know, not
Yeah.
a civil engineer.
So something for the board to think about. This is a retail space, and is our objective to screen it so no one can see it? Or is our objective to kind of have that nice happy medium so it looks appealing? So I'm looking at this right now, it's like, this is probably gonna be the nicest landscape lumberyard in the state. So where do you draw the line?
I think it's, for me, it's more of like repairing the site from what it
From the-
was.
Yeah,
I mean, it's less about screening a business for me, but it's just more about kind of putting back what was taken out.
And there is that threshold in the 1900.5B3, which Dave said, I don't know exactly what what it was before, but it says maximum extent possible, basically only 1/4 of the building should be exposed during any season. So,
from what vantage point?
I think from public right of way.
So you go back up
Is,
on Spear Street,
from
you know, this is
from
on
the
a hill.
first floor level primary viewpoints on the adjacent lots.
Okay.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
And Caitlin, to kind of build upon that, when I was looking at 1905B3 last night, and I was talking about, the extent that's viewable, again, I couldn't really tell by looking at these drawings. That's why I was thinking, some good virtual kind of software that's out there. A lot of architects, engineers have that stuff. I would think they could put something together to help us understand whether that's met or not, because right now, I couldn't say whether it's met or not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, Jeff might have a easier time visualizing this because it's his profession, but generally speaking,
Right.
I think most people don't know exactly what this looks like when it's planted. And to
kinda
the
feel-
extent we can get actual numbers.
I kind of feel bad about this because this may be better, but you could just say, well, I guess if we can't do this, we'll just do it the way it's already approved, and that's what we got.
That's a risk.
So that's a risk.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jeff's idea, obviously, as far as what is the middle ground, going to the visualization, obviously can be done, but I don't want to spend the farm getting there.
Right.
With the understanding of where we're already at. So that being the background, I understand Jeff's recommendations as far as having a professional look at these and to basically vet out the inappropriate species, and to provide any other recommendations that come forward. What I would like to also have them do is perhaps provide at least narrative of at least the reason we included the existing condition photos was to help understand how the plantings would improve the existing view sheds. And I think the next step might be just to actually show the plantings, like on those particular photos, to help you. It's one thing to see the red line, red dot on the screen. It's another thing to actually see it and see the benefits of how they would be applied. So I think that might be where we can go and try to give you the tools
Yeah.
to better understand that visualization component.
Yep, I mean, that would be great, but even if we just had, comment from a landscape architect, because again, you're here looking for improvements. Like I was saying, you could always fall back to what was already approved, so if this is indeed an improvement, then I guess we ought to consider it.
It changes,
But I just can't tell whether it's an improvement or not.
well, it also, looking back, there's trees that become susceptible to disease, and, you know, it's just been a recent thing that the Princeton elm.
Oh, Jeff, I don't have a problem with.
Yeah,
with
so it's that
No, I
kind
think
of
that's
review
prudent.
that I think
Yep.
it would be good.
Okay, so, Caitlin, I'm just looking at the first staff comment, essentially page 2 to 3, about whether the wall is subject to the setback requirements. I guess I didn't look at the wording of that section.
So there are setback requirements for structures, typically for fences. Well, not typically. For fences, there's no setback requirement, and there's been kind of an established pattern in the past of treating walls as if you would treat fences, because if
Okay.
they're serving the same purpose, it's just kind of different materials. So it was just calling that out because it is still a structure, and it's whether or not you would proceed with the idea of it being treated as a fence and not being subject to the setback requirements.
Okay.
And that was one of the reasons I also threw in the landscaping discussion there, because landscaping is also considered to be an exempt activity within the setbacks.
Yeah,
And there's definitely a benefit to that wall in getting soil for the trees to grow in, so.
okay, so any board members have thoughts on that question? If the wall should be treated like a fence?
I view it as treating as landscaping.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it doesn't have a footing, it's, yeah.
Let's even look at the section then. Okay, so it sounds so Caitlin, then we would continue the hearing pending receipt of some professional report or narrative along the lines that we
Tree
just discussed.
selection,
Yeah.
improvement,
I
yeah,
think just,
David, no,
I was just gonna say a general review by a landscape architect or master gardener of the species and planting design.
Okay.
David, would you be satisfied if the photos had trees placed in them to get a kind of a view from what the photos would show?
That would be great, but I'd even be receptive to just, the comment from the landscape architect or gardener. If they concur and whatever, that would be good.
Okay. All right, so then I will try and make a motion to continue this application. May 2nd is the next meeting.
We will fast track that particular effort.
Pending receipt of, Jeff, would you like to sort of specify? I mean,
I would just say a professional review of the landscape design and species. Yeah, by a landscape architect or licensed professional gardener.
okay. Well, did I make the motion or did you make the motion?
Oh,
I made the
did.
motion.
You did.
I made the motion to continue the application with the requirement as specified by Jeff. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Jeff.
Jeff P.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
We get there
Thank you.
eventually. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dave.
Oops.
Thank you.
Say again, Caitlin, I lost you.
You there?
Hello? Are we having connectivity issues? Maybe.
She said her connection wasn't the best.
Caitlin, can you hear us? Guess not. Oh, there we go.
What's the connection? All right. Who's good with technology?
I know. Is there a Hangouts link? Who set it up?
I don't know.
Where's our man back there?
Did you?
Did you set up the link?
No, that was
Dean?
Dean.
Oh, uh-oh.
Did Dean leave?
Does anybody have her phone number?
I'm not sure how. it's configured through
Maybe she could walk us through it. Or maybe Mark knows.
You saying that's a word?
We lost Caitlin. Do you know how to get her back?
I do not, Dean's next door in the other room.
Oh, he is?
I think so.
I don't know where she's at.
Just grab Dean.
All right.
We
I
lost her.
lost her.
Either that or she hung up on us.
Yeah, it's possible.
She should be able to get back on.
Yes.
Because the connection is lost.
Yeah, that happens from time to time. We have it at work too, same issue.
Is it hitting the same?
That's just a call with nobody invited to it.
Yeah. Yeah, she's got, it's a fixed link, so she should be able to get back
Fixed link.
on. There are two ways, so I'm gonna,
Do you, yeah, do you know her email address that she's using?
What if you go to that little thing with the people?
go to the thing with the people.
Up, no, no, no.
This
Up
thing?
here,
Yeah,
over
so
here
that's,
on the left.
yeah, so this is gonna be,
Yeah, you send it, typically send it to her.
She's calling me. Hi, Caitlin. Yep, I am.
Oh, you got it.
Can't get back on. He's gonna invite, I think Dean's inviting you right now.
or to try the link again.
Or just retry the link, possibly. It's not allowing you to do that.
I think links work better, that's been my experience. It may be the same link, it might not. And I'm sending this to the work email.
Dean's sending something to your work email. You want
There's
her
no
to,
link on, for her to click on.
he's emailing you a link for you to click on via your Shelburne email.
We're all set. Can you guys hear me?
There you
Yeah,
go.
we got you.
All right.
All right. Sorry, don't know what that was.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
You can see everything?
Yeah, that was weird.
We can't see you yet.
Don't hang up.
Oh, darn.
We're working on that.
I think that's a user selection on that side.
Okay, with apologies for the delay, we'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is application RFA 18-01. It's an application by Sellon and Sellon Architecture on behalf of the Jonathan Harris Trust, seeking approval for a right-of-way and required access for an existing lot with no access or frontage. The property is at 236 High Acres Farm Road and is located in the Rural District, Lakeshore Overlay District, and the Floodplain and Watercourse Overlay District. Do we have somebody who's here to tell us about this? Yes, we do. Okay, raise your right hand, please. Sign you in, swear you in. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give in this matter will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Okay.
And-
Let me just grab this.
Okay. Comes out.
Okay, I'm Stephen Selin from Selin and Selin Architecture, representing Jonathan Harris and and the group that owns the property collectively that we're looking at. Caitlin, you've changed. You look like the bag of a laptop these days. Do you have anything that you can pull up, or I have something on a mounted board here that we can use?
Kate, are you there?
Still have you, Caitlin?
Can you guys hear me? Because I can't hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Steve was asking if you had something you could bring up on the screen for the Harris.
Can you hear us?
Does it sound like it?
Caitlin, can you
I
hear
don't
us?
think you can hear us.
I don't think she can.
Old school version.
Old school.
Yep.
This. It's probably a little more clear with this guy.
But if she can't hear us, she can't take notes.
Okay.
Hang on,
Caitlin, can you hear?
hang on. Oops.
We can get her on the phone.
Yep, working on it.
Maybe just put her on speaker.
Everyone else has left the call.
Except that we want to
That's what it
stop
says.
projecting ourselves onto the wall.
You have no sound. Okay,
Oh, hold on, is that back on?
now you're back on.
Sounds like it.
Okay. What's going on? But,
Okay, can you hear us, Caitlin?
yeah.
Okay, we can hear you. Okay, let's try it again.
Okay.
I think we were hoping to bring up any plan that you have for the next application.
Okay, that's where I took the call before, so
Right.
just,
If you don't, we have the,
Do you think trying to bring it up dropped the call?
not sure.
because if so, we have
Yeah,
old
we
school
can-
map in front of
yeah.
us. We can use that.
Yeah, why don't we, Caitlin, why don't we just go ahead with this then, if that's okay? I don't know, can you see it?
Nah, I don't.
No.
But that's
But
okay,
I'd
I
probably-
can pull it up on a different screen.
Okay. Should I begin?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The Hay Acres Farm property consists of three lots. The boundary of it is this right here. I don't know if you could, is this?
That's for the TV.
Okay, all right. So it consists of three lots. Lot 1, which there's a main house on. Lot 2 and Lot 3. One of the boundaries is it's a shared property line with Shelburne Farms. So right now, the whole lot, or at least this main house right here, has had access historically since 1950 or so through an easement agreement with Shelburne Farms to get to this spot right here. Well, to get to mainly cross the border from Harbor Road out here. Past the breeding barn is out here somewhere, so it goes past the breeding barn and across this property line to get to the property, and that's been historically to access the main house right here. So now, two of the kids, I mean they're grown kids. Their mother had passed away a couple of years ago. Who was living in this house. They're now wanting to put a house here and here. The house here has this designated access, across Shelburne Farms, but there's no formal agreement until now to get through this lot to this lot, or to basically to this lot. I guess this one is. It's been the access for a long time, so it's probably grandfathered. But what we're trying to do is get a formal access easement agreement approved by the DRB that allows access through these two lots to get to this one. They're all owned by the same, by both brother and sister in a family trust. And so they've written up an agreement, an easement access agreement to get from here over to here, and that should be in your packet. It seems that way, yeah.
So Caitlin, can you hear?
Yes.
Your only comment should requiring an updated plat, as there is no such map on file.
Yeah, so there's no map that depicts these 3 lots as they actually exist. And there's no map that was created as part of this or that's recorded that shows the 20-foot right-of-way. It's obviously going to be following High Acres Farm Road. But my opinion that it should be recorded in the land records.
Yeah, it'd be in the best interest of the applicant as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
And we have the authority to require them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, so these applications, this is the 3rd one we've ever done, so there's not a lot of guidelines in except for the DRB has to approve this 20-foot access, and I think, you have the latitude to require conditions that make it make sense, and without anything being recorded in the land records showing these lots and this right-of-way, it could certainly come into question again later down the road.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. Okay.
Agreed.
Caitlin,
Lots
aren't
merging,
these,
just for the right of way?
sorry, Jeff?
The lots aren't merging, this is just to grant you guys a right of way.
Right.
That's it, okay.
Okay. And what do you mean we should consider the 20-foot right-of-way? Just in that comment? What's the proposal? It's a
Oh, you're
20-foot
asking me or-
right-of-way?
or
Yeah, and I'm
Caitlin?
asking you
Okay.
now, sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's to access through the lot. I don't know if we have to designate a 20-foot right-of-way. It's up to you folks whether the exact path has to be stipulated. I mean, we have a path that we intend to follow, but it's all owned by the same group, and it's really your call whether you want that.
But there's 3 lots in play, right?
Yep.
The problem is if they ever transfer title to one of these properties, then I would think it would be in the best interest of the landowner to define that easement.
But they're gonna do that, but for them to do that, we have to say they can do that, right?
Right, but
Okay.
we can or can't condition it, I guess, that they file an updated plat. There's nothing in the land records.
I think we should condition it, yeah, exactly, yeah, I agree.
But also, do we say, and it must be a 20-foot wide right-of-way?
It has to be at least 20 feet wide, that's per the standard.
And that's fine.
Right,
Yeah.
it has to be 20 feet wide, and it has to be connecting to a previously approved road or right-of-way, which is why you have that Southern Acres roads map. So it at least has to start there and follow, I would imagine, the High Acres Farm Road.
Yep. The question is does it want to be, does the plat want to define exactly where the easement is? How did they word it? Did they, I mean,
Mylar should be recorded within.
if it's a floating easement,
Okay. So there's an existing, can you run through it again? There's an existing agreement, there's an agreement with Shelburne Farms to the edge of Lot 3.
Right to here. Yep.
And then there's an easement over Lot 3 for Lot 1 at the moment.
Yeah, it's been just drafted up and signed by all the members of the trust.
Oh, so that's what we have here.
Yeah,
this is
with
a
the 4
draft.
pages
So
of
there's
different
nothing-
signatures, yeah.
So there's actually nothing official for Lot 1 at the moment, but there must be because it's developed.
Right. There is something official with Shelburne Farms for Lot 1. So that's already, that's already an approved access
Okay.
to this place right here.
Only to there. So then how does Lot 1 get across Lot 3? Is that lot 3 at the top?
Caitlin, I'm going to tap into you on this, but this is, it's really been looked at, and on the tax records, it is all shown as one lot, even though there are different maps that show when this came from Southern Acres, and this one came from, I believe, Meach Cove, to be joined into this many, decades ago. But this has always been the main house. So this has been, I don't know if, how it works when something was done in 1950 before any zoning was around, but there never was an issue to get to this lot right here. So, Caitlin, I think you were saying that nothing is really needed to get to this main house right here, but irregardless, that easement agreement makes that official. It grants access through this lot to both this lot and this lot.
Okay. And Kate, the 20-foot wide easement needs to be through lots 1 and 3 to
Right.
make it all the way to 2? Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
So I really think it should be a defined path too, because
There's
these
language,
lots are going to be developed in the future, and you don't.
there's language
want-
in here though, unless I'm missing something, a final copy of, location of a copy of Exhibit B to the agreement attached here too for reference determining such locations. So there's apparently an attachment to this document,
Not at all clear.
It was
so,
the connection through Shelburne Farms.
okay.
So it just talks about where the starting point is. And that refers to an old map and that agreement that came with that.
Oh,
Caitlin, Dave, hold here. So are you suggesting that this easement essentially be surveyed and tied to essentially the property lines, so it's defined on the maps? Because right now it's just kind of somebody's kind of like, it's about here, sketched in.
Yeah, it's an existing road. I
Yeah.
mean, it is a road, but
But if
it
you went to
follows
a
this
map and
path.
if you're
But
looking for your bearings and lengths and stations and whatever, you wouldn't find that.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you'd see that as a road, but
Right. But it's
we're
not-
perfectly
it's not-
fine with actually, making that path, if that's what that's
Yeah.
what's
I'm just trying, I
required.
think Caitlin's trying to recommend that you actually, that becomes a defined easement
And that'd be fine.
and a matter of record, which I would
For
think
the
the
better,
owners would
it's
want.
in the best interest of the property owner if they ever do that. If it's defined, there's no question. It's not, it's a defensible easement.
but is that what the intention of this document was, though? This, that's dated 21st of March?
I don't know that it was, because there are multiple roads through the property, multiple ways to get to this spot right here. So unless it's required by the DRB to have one specific road to get there, somebody's going to use whatever road they want to use to get there. It's all the same family. But just like you're saying, Mark, if, somewhere in the future, if one of these is ever subdivided off, like this one subdivided off, I can see how, if I were living here, I wouldn't want this person to drive anywhere they want to. So
So could I suggest,
we're fine with that.
there's language in here. It says a miler shall be recorded within 180 days. We can add to it with clear definition of the right-of-way. Right, and that could be, I don't think we need to have arcs and angles of a surveyor, as long as it's clearly defined and articulated, drawn to scale on the Mylar. What do you guys think about that?
And is that, ignorant, but is that the same as what we were talking about, which is to record a plat that shows the definitions of all?
And it's got it identified, it's not a floating thing where there's this big 100-foot zone that could have the right-of-way. It's, here's the 20-foot right-of-way as drawn to scale. You guys,
I'll go with that, yeah.
you guys, you think it's okay?
Yep.
All
To
right.
make a motion?
I
along
make a
those
motion
lines?
to propose that.
So are
Okay.
we approving it with a condition?
Yes.
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 So that means that really what I have to do is make a motion to finalize the record for application RFA 18-01 and direct staff to prepare a decision indicating approval of this application as depicted on the application materials, but with the condition that a Mylar should be recorded within 180 days, and that must be,
Clear definition of the right-of-way.
But I don't know how you can do that.
Draw it to scale.
To what?
Draw it to scale, 20-foot wide. There it is. Then
Yeah,
someone else
that-
can argue
the
about it.
problem is it's not
That easement has
enforceable.
to, it's not enforceable.
gotta
It has to be
have-
in reference to
It's gotta have
points
meets
on
and
your
bounds and
boundaries.
all that.
Put an exit point, put an entrance point. I mean, you don't have, do you have to have a lawyer come in and put an a survey with arcs and,
That's the only thing that's enforceable.
That's what makes it a legal enforceable document.
there you go for it, man. I tried.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
You know, and I would think you guys would want that
Yeah, I mean,
because,
otherwise they can go
I
anywhere.
would,
Like even if you draw something, if you can't, yeah.
But that's totally doable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so then Caitlin, can we still make that a condition, or do we need to come back and review that before we can?
No, that's a condition. They have
Okay.
to define, a surveyor will do that.
Okay.
Second,
I mean, you could make a condition that it be reviewed by an engineer and that the right-of-way agreement be reviewed by the town attorney before it's recorded. Did you catch that at all, Wise?
Okay. Yeah, if somebody files a plat and it's stamped by a licensed surveyor,
That works.
the licensed surveyor will stamp it, then fine.
yep,
Okay.
And.
stamped by, it doesn't have to be a surveyor, licensed by a stamped professional.
So,
We'll have it,
When it comes to plats, I think only a surveyor can do that, but.
and reviewed by the town attorney?
No,
No?
that's too much.
Okay.
Make it complicated.
Okay.
So that needs to be-
Stamped by a licensed professional surveyor.
Okay.
The Mylar shall be stamped by a licensed professional surveyor
okay.
and recorded within 180 days. I mean, the second suggested condition here, though, is that it must be reviewed, the Mylar or legal documents must be reviewed and approved by the zoning administrator and town attorney before filing. Are we saying we don't need that? We now would be
Why?
inclined to go with the,
Why do we need a town attorney to look it over and pay tax dollars to do that?
No, I don't think so.
Caitlin, why do we need that?
It's a legal document going into the record. It's the only,
Every document
reference.
we have goes into the, it's a
Right.
legal document.
If a licensed surveyor stamps it, he has the credentials to do so. I
Yeah,
don't know what a lawyer would know about it.
That's good. I agree with you.
well, not the plat itself, but the right-of-way agreement that's written up and then would reference that exhibit.
Does it have any relation to it being, I mean, would it be any different if it were three separate property owners that all own these separate things? Or does it have to do with whether the person here is encumbering on this person here without them knowing it? Is that
You need to
part of the
treat this
reason?
whole- I think you need to be safe, I think you need to treat this as though there were three separate property owners. Whether they happen to be the same family or people, I think you're open.
Next year, they all get in a fight and they
Yeah.
want to sell.
I think we're trying to anticipate.
Protect
Yeah.
everybody.
Protect
And,
everybody.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm just talking about as far as getting the agreement together and the easement. Once it's down on paper, they can fight later.
Yeah.
But it's down on paper already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm okay with waiving the legal review by the town, because if there's an issue with the easement, it's gonna be a fight between the landowners. It's really not
Right.
gonna,
Not for the town to judge.
it's not, it's, I don't think it's connected to the town. And the town's not gonna have to enforce this. If this was a piece of town property, it might be differently, but
Yeah.
there's no
Okay.
public property
well,
involved.
the only thing I would say is that it's probably protecting the town, because if we approve something that's not up to legal, I don't know.
There could be a lot of things we approve that aren't up to legal snuff.
Yeah.
That's not, we're not gonna weigh in on that.
But I think a lot of things actually have that condition in it, that, and we just sort of read it in and maybe don't register it.
We don't want to, I don't think the town wants to be liable for the language that's in the right of way. I mean, we're requiring that they clearly define and have a professional person stamp where the right of way is going. And then if all things
But
go,
we have to have a legal right of way, and how can we tell if it's legal if we don't have an attorney review the document?
it's up to them. It's their property, it's not the town's property.
I know, but we can't approve this without a legal right of way. So how do we know it's legal?
That's just like saying, when we're approving properties, how do we know that they own the property and it's not tangled up somewhere in a title search?
But again,
You go down a nasty rat hole.
are reviewed.
I will say that this is a pretty common condition of approval
Yeah,
that we do for
it
a lot of
is.
subdivisions and for a lot of easements and right-of-ways.
I just feel better if we
pretty-
keep it the way
We're
we
talking about
normally
an
do it.
hour's- I mean, we're talking about, if our attorney can't review this thing in an hour, then there's a problem. So,
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, exactly. So I've never seen these get extended out until, a couple day-long reviews. It's always just a quick, set of notes,
I
maybe.
don't want to spend taxpayers' money on this. No, my vote is no on that one.
Okay, so if there's so we have to have a vote then on whether we're including I would make a motion that we have the first condition as we've just been through with the licensed surveyor signing it off. And I would also make a motion that we include condition number 2, which would require that the Mylar and legal documents are reviewed and approved by the zoning administrator and town attorney before filing. So then, that's my motion.
I will second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
all those opposed?
All those
Nay.
opposed? Okay. Okay.
I'm going to
so
go
we
on
have-
record for that.
So we have
All
we
right,
have one
so now
Jeff
back
in
to-
the.
Who
still-
seconded the
Yeah,
motion?
I didn't hear an egg, 'cause I didn't really hear you.
I did.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So to make it clear, then, all those in favor,
Aye.
Aye.
all those against.
Nay. Or aye.
I'm still abstaining because I didn't hear the motion, I guess.
So if you look
repeat
on
that.
your
It was,
sheet on the last page, the motion was to direct staff to prepare a decision to indicate approval, and then the conditions are enumerated underneath. And the first condition was a Mylar must be recorded within 180 days, and then we made that more specific in that it must, yeah, with
with
me.
that one.
Keep going.
Okay, so we made it more specific in that the Mylar must be a detailed description of all 3 lots as existing and must describe the proposed right of way, and the whole thing must be signed off and stamped by a licensed surveyor. That must be done within 180 days. The second condition is that any Mylar or legal documents must be reviewed and approved by the zoning administrator and town attorney before filing. And I think the disagreement among the board is as to the second part. But that was the whole motion.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. I don't know what your vote was. You're still abstaining?
No, I'll vote yay.
Okay. So then we just
Okay.
have one against, Caitlin.
Okay, got it.
Right.
So it's
I
approved
believe
with
we
that
got
condition?
there with that condition.
Correct.
And we
With-
don't need to come in front of the
with-
board again?
No, with both
Okay.
conditions.
Okay, yeah, great. Okay,
So it needs to be detailed and it needs to be reviewed and approved.
easy enough. Thanks very
Okay.
much.
Okay. Moving on to item number 8 on the agenda, which is applications SP 18-03 and CU 18-01, which were continued from our previous meeting. And we continued them because at that time you were, as I understand it, in talks with some of the homeowners, and you weren't sure if you were going to change your plans and the design. And we're back again, and I think maybe you should give us another overview. What's changed since 2 weeks
You
ago?
want to swear people in?
I could do that, yes. So who do we have who's here to speak to this? Okay. So if you could everybody who's here in relation to this application who might give evidence should stand up and raise their right hands. Okay, so do all of you swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in this case will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. All right. But we'll start with an overview if you don't mind.
Very good. Dave Marshall from Civil Engineering Associates. Kate, thank you for putting that up on the board. What the plan represents is the existing conditions relative to Spear Street that runs in the north-south direction. North is up on this particular plan. This is the Beaver Creek neighborhood that is on the east side and just on the south side of the northeast component of the 93-acre portion of the Quiniesca Golf Course. There are 6 golf holes on the west side of the road. You've seen an application before you for the development of this particular side. And the new owners of the Quiniesca Golf Course would like to place I'm going to say construct 6 golf holes within the 93-acre parcel. Granted, it's not going to be as long a golf course as it is today, but nonetheless, it's one that they feel is important to basically maintain an 18-hole configuration. So, Kate, why don't we move forward a little bit? So this particular plan...
Oops, losing it. Okay. Dave, is that right?
That's good. It's obviously at this particular scale, we will introduce some plans that actually show these particular areas in greater scale. But nonetheless, what the lighter shade areas represent are proposed either reconfiguration of golf holes or the construction of new green or tee complexes. And 4 of the golf holes are located within the existing footprint of the golf course, and 2 of the golf holes proposed are located within a forested area that's on the north side of the Beaver Creek neighborhood. And in this particular case, the area in the southeast quadrant has undergone a couple of revisions in coordination with not only your own Natural Resources Committee, but also with the state of Vermont's, both wetlands and the streams group, to the point where the current design actually is a significant improvement in regards to the avoidance of additional stream crossings as well as cutting down trees. So we won't bore you with the past history, but nonetheless, it's one in which we work closely with those particular groups to come up with a plan that was more sensitive to the area, and feel that we're in great shape on that end of things. Other things that were going on in this particular side is that we have been in discussions with the neighbors of Beaver Creek, and 2 of the neighbors appeared before you at the last hearing. There's Mr. Burris, whose home is right here at 499 Beaver Creek Road, and he's here tonight. And then we also had Nathaniel and Candace Pinar. They're at 579. They came to the hearing looking for information. We provided information, and they indicated to us that they were comfortable with the plan as proposed. So we continued our discussions with Mr. Burris, and we hadn't come as far as long as we had hoped, but nonetheless, we did reach agreement today as far as a plan would increase the buffering from the Beaver Creek properties into the golf activity areas. At this late date, obviously it's out of normal for you to entertain information like that, but What we did want to do is at least have the discussion of whether or not you would like to at least take a look at this. So if Ian, if we can have you pass that down. So what we're giving you here are two sheets. One represents, hey, Kate, can you
Yep.
go to the next sheet?
This one?
Oh,
Are you
sorry,
talking
next one
about
after
the
that.
updated?
So what we're handing out is the proposed plan versus the plan that's part. And what we want you to focus on is, again, the areas north of Beaver Creek. It is, the second plan represents, again, what's part of your application package. And it shows the extent of the tree clearing that's proposed as part of the application. The plan on top represents the one that the agreement with Mr. Burris has been entered into. That would basically both reduce the clearing and create additional buffering from the teeing areas to the Beaver Creek neighborhood. So we felt that that based on a reduction in natural resource impacts, that it was an improvement. So any staff comments that, or any findings from the various, whether it be the natural resources or from staff as far as acceptability of the second sheet is only going to be made better with the first sheet. So, and Kate, it's probably too complicated. We did share PDFs of these two images so that we could toggle back and forth if you wanted to get a better understanding of, again, those clearing limits. But if you do train your eyes onto the, Kate, if you can, zoom in a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry, she did bring up the current plan, or the
Oops, sorry,
proposed
it's
plan
just
to be
too
introduced into evidence. Is this particular area. The old plan basically had more tree clearing in this particular location. And what this does is actually change the orientation and location of the golf holes in a way that, again, took the teeing areas further away from the Beaver Creek neighborhood and placed them further to the north. So what we're really hoping for is to have a discussion on the entire application, but also have you, in the best of all worlds, allow this to come in as something that both the applicant and I think Mr. Burris would like to testify that we have the board consider.
So guys, just so you know, if you want to move this into evidence, you'll have to make a motion.
So moved.
Seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I think we did, Caitlin.
Okay.
Great, thank you. That was
And
very quick.
Joanna, can you just mark up your plans with Exhibit A?
Yeah,
Which one is A?
both of them.
So
I
the
can tell you,
highlight,
I can, if you want, Caitlin, I can give you the attributes. It's drawing C 2.1 with a revision date of 4/17/18, and the attributes are revised hole 7 tree clearing.
Okay. I think I just want a paper copy for the
Yep.
file that has it marked and dated.
Okay, so then we should, I don't know, shall we go through any other questions? I mean, do you want to hear from Mr. Burris?
I'm sorry, Nate, did you want to introduce anything in regards to?
I mean, I suppose, so you swore yourself, I mean, you were sworn in, weren't you, earlier?
Yes.
So, yeah. I suppose I just wondered if you wanted to make some comments, because obviously we're postponed because of, you having discussions, so.
Thank you. So I am in favor of the board moving forward with this particular revised design. Mr. Marshall and I have been discussing this application for, I guess, over 2 months now, and for what it's worth, I just want to say I appreciate his professionalism in the midst of those discussions. We have come to an agreement that I think balances our various interests, and this is a product of that, as part of the agreement we've reached, we also are asking the board, and I think Mr. Marshall can also speak to this, to include as a condition of its approval, should it approve the application, a buffer that runs between the, I guess, the southern side of the 7th hole fairway up through the green. It's sort of a curved area, and the northern boundary of my property line, how the board would like to structure that if it wishes to adopt that request on the eastern and western ends of the area that doesn't border 499 Beaver Creek is certainly up to the board, but a condition of our agreement is that the board adopt that request, and of course it's your prerogative to do so. And that's really all I have to say at this point.
That's a fair representation of our discussions to date. And again, as far as often when we're looking for buffering between residential uses and commercial uses, the board will sometimes indicate what an appropriate buffer would be. And right now, the agreement is the existing 7th hole to Mr. Burris's property.
And by buffering, you're imagining landscaping? Or-
Basically keeping the existing conditions, I mean, basically not removing the trees that
Okay.
currently buffer the existing golf course activities along the 7th hole and Mr. Burris's home.
Okay. So Caitlin, that deals with some of the issues that were raised in the staff report.
Yes, it does. I mean, it deals with issues per their conversation, but
So,
Well,
you still need to review.
Yeah.
So I guess I would still recommend walking through the staff report and the comments, just to be clear that the DRB has also come to its own decision.
yeah.
so is this the same abutting property owner as what's mentioned in 330.3C?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, so that's really what I meant. That's been dealt with.
Okay.
Stormwater.
Right, so stormwater, I'm still waiting on comments from Dave Wheeler. I have some emails back and forth with him, and he plans on getting a narrative relatively soon, but wasn't prepared to give it to me just yet. So we're still awaiting those comments, and and just based on the stormwater comments, I guess I would recommend that the DRB continue this hearing, but we can certainly walk through the rest of it.
I guess out of respect of this conditions, right now the project is required to get a state operational stormwater permit, and that has been submitted and has completed its technical review and is going on public notice. So the state of Vermont has come to the conclusion that it meets the current state stormwater rules, which are the same things that Dave Wheeler is reviewing it on. So I do have correspondence that indicates that it's gotten to that particular point. If you don't believe me. But right now, I guess if I'm going to get onto the soapbox and editorial-wise, is that right now we have a little bit of redundancy between the town's stormwater review and the state of Vermont stormwater review. You have a lot of applications that don't have to get a state stormwater permit. It's very appropriate to have Dave's input. But at this point in time, with a project that does require a state stormwater permit, it's just redundancy. And it's actually the state of Vermont that interprets their own rules rather than your consultant. So that's why, in the interest of at least trying to minimize time delays, if there's an opportunity to think about that, we'd like you to consider that status of the application process right now.
Okay, you're essentially saying because you're in the process of getting the state stormwater that we shouldn't wait for comments from the town?
I think, to be blunt, sure.
Yes.
How long has South Burlington had it to review? Do you know offhand, Dave?
Probably 6 weeks.
Thank you.
So to be fair to Dave, he did provide initial comments, and it basically spurred ultimately the discussions with the state of Vermont how to interpret and to apply their rules. And with revisions, which are currently part of the application package you have, no, we came to the determination, or the state came to the determination that the application is deemed complete, not only deemed complete, but compliant with the rules.
And so this is that this last thing that we have in our packet here, draft discharge permit, is that related to?
No, that one's a different one. So the state manages two different stormwater permits. One is construction phase, which is what you have in front of you.
Right,
And the other is post-construction phase, or what we call operational. And so it's the operational permit that Dave Wheeler has initially provided his comments. And Kate is being fair to Dave and saying, hey, let's wait for some more of Dave's comments. And all I'm getting at is that we've already cut to that chase as far as ultimately a final determination from the state of Vermont that it meets the technical requirements of the stormwater rules.
Okay.
And what is the state's next step? Because you said it meets technical review. Is there
I'm
something?
sorry, Lisa, I didn't.
Is there something more that you're waiting on the state for?
The state
just-
adopted brand-new standards as far as how to put projects on public notice.
Okay.
So right now, when an application goes in, it has to be there for 15 days before it can be put on technical notice. But because of a computer glitch, the 15 days didn't start until last Friday,
Okay.
at which point I got an apology letter from the state that said, hey, we can't put you on public notice until we've gotten the 15 days in place. And then typically, when it's all technically reviewed and approved, then it goes on a 30-day public notice after that. So anyways, all we're getting at is that they tried to go and place it on the 30-day public technical, post-technical review component, and the computer system said, no, you can't do that yet. So, but the technical review's done.
So I guess if there's at least 30 more days on that, what is the harm in waiting for the materials from Dave Wheeler?
Well, typically, we would be comfortable with a condition that says we will provide you a copy of the state permit
Okay.
prior to starting construction, for example.
Okay. So.
So I think Kate actually recommended that we step through the application, the plans, and then we can basically round out with her comments from the staff report as well as any other questions from the board. It just help it, it's a little choppy right now. So what I wanted to do is at least allow you to absorb a little bit more of the application components, and then we can dive back in if that's acceptable.
Yep.
Okay. So what Kate has done is shown, again, the north half of the area where we have basically a new green complex and a new T complex being constructed to take an existing par 4 and make it into 2 golf holes. We also have this, what we call the combined T complex within the wooded area that basically will allow an existing par 5 to be made into 2 short par 4s. And then we also have a par 5 that will be made into a par 3 and a par 5 to basically round out the construction on this particular side. In addition to the golf hole constructions, there's going to be a couple places where we need to create borrow pits, basically places to borrow material and build up areas, only because ledge can be problematic, and we're looking to avoid blasting if we can. And the way to avoid blasting is to bring in material and create the plateaus that you need. So we've sought permission from the state, and currently it's under public notice for the construction stormwater plan to perhaps build a couple of ponds. I don't think we'll build all of them, but long story short is based on whatever the needs are for fill material, we will excavate a pond, take that material and build up an area to basically achieve the design goals for the project. So that's how we try to minimize the amount of material that needs to be brought in on public roads to, again, keep everything localized as far as the management of mass earth movements within the project site. Kate, can we go to the next sheet? Oh, I'm sorry.
The total
It'll be
plan
sh-
set.
Yeah, it'll
you're
be sheet
looking-
2.2 on the original application. Oh,
Okay,
let's
so-
stop here. Okay, so when we talked about riparian corridors, what you see here are blue, which represents streams on the state's mapping, as well as either wetlands and their 50-foot buffer, or wetlands and or streams with a 50-foot buffer. And those, based on the size of the stream, those are the standards that the state reviews activities in the general proximity of these particular natural resource areas. And the line of this northeast quadrant had, again, kept everything out of the 50-foot buffer. The plan that the board graciously brought into the record actually reduced that area of clearing in these old T locations. But as you move beyond the northeast quadrant and head down into the southeast quadrant, this is again Monroe Brook that basically runs through the property. There are a number of existing golf hole crossings. What we propose to do with the reconfiguration in this area is no longer cut down these trees, but to actually work above and outside of the riparian corridor and utilize the existing bridge crossings to create one additional golf hole in this location. So now, Kate, we can go to perhaps sheet 2.2, which will show that work proposed in the southerly half of the property in a little bit more detail. Here we go. So again, this is the Beaver Creek neighborhood. This is the common property line between the two. And this is Spear Street and the intersection of Webster Road. This is the maintenance facility on the opposite side of the road. And in this particular case, there's some earthwork proposed in this area to basically take an existing par 3 green and build a new one here and make that a short par 4. And then the other work that we talked about was putting a new green right here, teeing off from behind this particular green to a new tee complex going there. So what it does is avoids, again, disturbing this particular area that has grown up over the past 25 years and basically concentrates activities out in the open grass areas today. And then the last work that's actually east of the existing clubhouse, this is the clubhouse and this is the parking lot area, is taking the existing par 5 and creating a little bit of a shortcut up over the hill and back down on the other side, and then playing a par 3 hole back in this particular direction. So this would be a new green complex, and we'd build a new green complex here. The existing, if anybody's played the golf course and amongst the board members, there's an existing green here that we'll use as actually a par 3 playing out away from the clubhouse. So basically trying to reutilize as much of the existing facilities as possible, but then augmenting them where necessary. We did have the entire property reviewed as far as archaeology, not that it's a review item of yours, but as far as sensitivities to any type of archaeological resources. They spent a lot of time in the north end doing test pitting and didn't find anything, and then also did subsequent work, and we met with the state Division of Historic Preservation archaeologist Scott Dillon, and he signed off on the activities on the southern half also. So, but moving on, Kate, why don't we step through some more of the plans to get into perhaps some of the work around the proposed clubhouse area. So before we go any further, Kate, what these are just plans at a little bit easier readable scale as far as that's concerned. And what we would need to do is basically update this plan to reflect what's depicted on sheet 2.1 that was submitted to you. Yep, thank you. So again, same thing. Well, let's keep going to 2.7 if we can. So this represents the existing conditions around the clubhouse. So again, the clubhouse itself, there's parking, perpendicular parking off of Spear Street. And then once you get into the property, there is the existing parking configuration. We appeared before you previously for some striping modifications in this particular location. And what that did was basically allow them to, well, let's go to the next plan. That shows a little bit of what you looked at before, which was creating the golf carts management area and creating modifying slightly the circulation pattern that basically works through the parking lot. Now, this particular application seeks to widen the far southern end, and this is basically to mitigate the loss of parking spaces that are either associated with the cart management area or the fact that there are some unmarked, well, I'll call them perpendicular parking spaces on the west side of Spear Street. Haven't seen those used in a long time. I can remember back in the heyday that you might see 10, maximum 15 vehicles on the other side of the road. What we're trying to do over on this particular side of the road is basically mitigate not only this component, but also the loss of the parking spaces on the other side. So under today's conditions, we have 94 parking spaces. We're going to lose 10 here, but we're going to gain 20 back here. So we're going to have a net increase of 10 parking spaces on the east side of the road. And the other side of the coin is that because it's becoming a shorter golf course, means that we also can't put as many people out on the golf course at one point in time. So the parking demand is going to be a little bit less. If the course were totally full, you know, every golf hole has a place where somebody can be, a group, a foursome or threesome or whatever, twosome, will be out there hitting, playing the hole. And in this particular case, we see probably a reduction of about 8 spaces going from a par 72 to a par 69 golf course. So there's going to be less of a demand on parking. So we feel very comfortable that between these particular expansion components, plus unfortunately the course becoming a bit shorter, that we will have adequate parking in this particular location. And again, the other thing to keep in mind with all of this is that the clubhouse and the operations all worked as an 18-hole golf course since 1965. What we're doing is basically now making the golf course all on the east side, still 18 holes, and all with the same supporting infrastructure with permissions to widen this particular end of the parking lot. Kate, if we go to the next sheet. Yep, that's good right there. So in this particular case, what we're proposing to do is introduce landscaping that isn't out there today. Some of it is at the far southwest corner of the parking lot where we're looking to basically screen some parking that isn't there today. You know, that's pretty much a standard of applicants. And then at the same time, we're also looking to separate the golf experience from the parking experience. So here we're looking to basically put in additional landscaping in this particular area, as well as create a separation of both pedestrian circulation as well as cart circulation out from the parking lot and back into the golf course itself. Because currently under today's conditions, golfers are asked to go through the parking lot and come out to this particular 10th tee area, and we're looking to basically create that separation from those conflicts now. So that's basically in a nutshell what's going on with regard to the parking lot at the clubhouse. Kate points out in the application that this particular proposed porch is not part of this application. It will be an application before you in the near future, but you need to ignore that as part of this application because the zoning, even though it's been adopted by the select board, technically hasn't come into play yet. So it will in the near future, but in the meantime, we just have to pretend that that's not on the plans. Kate, let's step through a couple more sheets and see if there's anything else that is worthy of presentation before we get into staff report and questions from the board. So these are just all, even closer close-ups of what's happening as far as conceptual grading and layout. So maybe we don't need to deal with that. You will get into the 3 series of plans, and that's the erosion prevention and sediment control features that are associated with the project, and based on the draft permit that we gave you, it has been accepted by the state as being compliant with their rules for what we call an individual permit. So an individual permit has a higher level of oversight than either a low-risk project or a moderate-risk project. And what that does is it introduces a third party to oversee the work being done by the contractor. The contractor has his on-site plan coordinator. They're required to do the regular reporting. But as far as a third party coming in and looking through and certifying that they are doing it in accordance with the state rules, the individual permit, because of the amount of disturbance, requires that additional level of oversight. So that's what this particular project will be subject to, and as such, again, we've gotten to the point where technically it's been deemed complete and it's on public notice right now. So and the last part, Kate, if you can go to the very back to sheet 4.0 and 4.1. So what she's going to show us is the stormwater management component. So in this particular case, with the expansion of the pavement within the parking lot, and the fact that it's grandfathered and there hasn't been any treatment over the past 53 years, what this particular application does is proposes a bioretention area that basically filters the water and also provides some storage of water during storm events. And, through that typical section, ultimately, like I said, treats the stormwater before it gets discharged into the conveyance that ultimately goes into one of the big golf course ponds. But in this particular case, that's the primary feature of the stormwater management that is located immediately south of the parking lot. So if this plan were to extend further up, that's where the edge of the pavement is at the south end of the parking lot. Okay, I've said enough for now. So Kate, or we'll leave it up to the board on how you'd like to proceed from here.
I mean, Kate, I guess we'll just work through the staff report.
Yeah, I tried to pull out all the comments quickly while you guys were going over that. And some of them just can kind of be clustered together. They're a bit repetitive. One of them being, just because it was brought up in the application materials themselves, is your stance on the T areas and the golf cart paths, whether or not you would be considering them to be a structure or landscaping or something else, and that would determine the setbacks.
Determine the what?
The setbacks.
Oh, setbacks. Okay, sorry. Yes, I mean, so the concern was raised by Mr. Burris, but then if the applicant has come to an agreement, I mean, do we still need to decide that, is what I'm asking?
Yeah, what we need to do
I don't know if we do.
We want it locked down. In other words,
Going forward.
if you go along that whole, at least my thoughts are, that whole northern property line or southern property line from the golf course that butts there, how much of that land needs to fall in a setback so it doesn't get disturbed in the future? Is it 100 feet? Or is it something less than that? Because I don't think it would be fair to the property owner to say you can't touch any of it forever.
Okay.
So Caitlin brings out on 330.3C that 5 lots or more, 100-foot setback. Is there any reason to think otherwise?
There's a 100-foot setback for the front yard,
That's the front.
and that's for structures.
Yeah.
And so my question was, would the DRB take the stance that a cart path or the T area would be a structure, and that would only apply to the front yard, and you'd actually be looking at the side and rear yard setbacks if you went down that, and that would actually be more like a 250-foot setback because it's 10% of the lot frontage.
By your definition, it shows that driveways are considered structures.
They are,
So
but there is
there's
also an
some-
allowance to have driveways be within 5 feet of a property line. It's an exception to setback, the regular setback requirements. So that is one.
So would a
One
cart path
consideration.
not be similar?
You have to go and look at, and David, you presented the case, the case law and the
Well, we talked a little
Cabot
bit.
decision and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it unfortunately comes back to your definitions and how you want to interpret that.
Right.
So when it comes to setback, it specifically says how the distance from any property line or street or right-of-way to the nearest point of a building on the lot bounded by that property line. So it specifically talks about building. Now, the next question is, what's the definition of a building? And then that's where building or structure starts to bring in these other things. And the question ultimately is where does it end? So that's why, the emphasis has always been on setbacks to buildings or applying buildings to setbacks. And the concept of trying to bring in other things is something that is the discussion point.
This is an interesting one. How to interpret the setback, if there's any pre-existing.
Well, you have to read David's letter. I mean, that's one argument, just reading the April 10th letter. And then he goes back and cites the Cabot decision. Which I do recall.
I mean, the
And that-
definition of landscaping includes a pedestrian walk, which arguably,
Cart path is
It's
somewhere
more-
between a driveway
Yeah.
and a walkway.
yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that's something, we might have to deliberate on that. I don't think it's
So
an easy
Kate,
one.
Can you mentioned the side and rear setback being 200 feet potentially?
10% of the overall, the road frontage.
So the frontage, Jeff, is that it's, they got a little bit more than a half a mile of
Yeah.
frontage.
Right, so it stacks up to be, it's a pretty big setback, which is why I'm just kind of bringing up this discussion about what we would consider to be a structure, and if a cart path is kind of like Joanna said, some like a pedestrian path, or would it be a driveway? And I suppose worst case scenario, just in terms of the use of it, it could be considered a driveway, but like I said, there's an exemption to the setbacks for driveways, and they can be located within 5 feet. So if you were inclined to say, yeah, we're going to consider this to be more like a driveway, we just have to amend the plans to have all the cart paths that aren't already existing to be at least 5 feet from the property line.
And where do parking lots fall? I mean, because if the parking lot's in the front yard setback, it seems like a bigger deal than a cart path. And is it
Yeah,
just-
so parking lots, except for in the mixed use district, don't have any setback requirements.
All right, whatever. It kind of seems ridiculous.
Parking lot.
I mean, it seems ridiculous.
And that's a fair enough thing to say, is that it's a pedestrian path and that it's not a structure. I'm just posing the question.
Okay. All right.
All right.
And then, I don't know how decided you are on that, but if you'd like to move past it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
there's some comments about the landscaping. I don't see any issues with the landscaping. It's an improvement. So unless you had any issues with the actual plantings themselves or the location. I think it's okay. It's just pointing it out in the staff report.
Yeah.
And the comment under 9, well, I mean, has that changed? Or will it change? I see there's a comment about whether the proposed buffer is adequate under 1900.3E. Now, will that change given that your plan has changed here?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because it says, proposal includes removal of trees along the northeast property line that abuts Beaver Creek.
So the answer I just gave you was based on the parking lot and the proposed revisions. It wouldn't change the parking lot landscaping.
Right.
What it would do is obviously retain additional existing vegetation. We're not proposing to plant any out by the golf holes at this point in time, but
Right.
just the change in the plan plus whatever buffering obligation is included helps, will create additional retention of vegetation along that corridor.
There's no disturbance in that area. basically.
That's the idea. Yeah, there's an existing vast trail, but other than, or pre-existing old vast trail through there. But that's the only existing feature through that particular portion of the property.
And that might be the section where you discuss how much of a buffer, if any, you want to have there. I mean, you could approach it as putting a buffer, or you could approach it as depicted on the plans. Those are the clearing limits.
Agreed. I mean, would the applicant be amenable to setting some type of a clearing limit on this current plan? And,
Well, I think we have.
okay, well, I'm used to looking at your, I can't see it up there, so let me,
Okay, so anyway, sheet 2.1 shows the proposed clearing
So you define
limits.
the clearing limits based around like the 8th hole, coming back around to the 14th. That's it.
So Kate, if you can zoom in on that one a little bit, what the ring around the two rectangles on the right-hand side of that particular drawing would represent would be the clearing limits proposed, and that any changes from that would require that we come back to the town.
Yep. Okay, that's reasonable. I think that kind of defines the buffer in my mind.
I hate to be a jerk about this, but it's just a picture on a chart. How do you know the limits? This is even more ambiguous. Like distances, do they need to be set somewhere?
Well,
So
the
they
way
are
it works-
scalable. I mean, conditions of approval that other projects might or have been subject to is having a licensed surveyor go and stake the limits. You know, at least you don't have a layperson trying to interpret where the trees are. That is something that actually has already been done on the property. Well, it was done under the old design, hasn't been updated yet. But that's something that we would be comfortable with as far as a condition of approval, that a licensed surveyor flag those limits clearly to make sure that there isn't anything done
I always take it for granted.
by
That's what-
mistake.
That's what you do, but that would be a good condition.
I think so.
So the condition would be that the limits of clearing are established. The clearing limits indicate on the plans will be established by a licensed surveyor. Or,
And when we say limits of clearing, that almost like by default defines where development can happen.
Yeah.
Because if you're outside the limits of clearing, you can't touch it. So then
defines the buffer.
defines the buffer, so then we don't have to worry about setbacks.
In my,
We're talking about, I thought we were talking about just adjacent to Beaver Creek. Or are we talking,
that's really the only clearing that's proposed. I can't see it on the big picture, but is there additional clearing proposed besides the clearing limits by the 4th tee and the 8th tee?
Yeah, yes, there's a small amount of clearing that has grown up over time on what is today's 13th hole. This is the very end, but if you remember in your mind's eye, actually, Kate, yeah, if we can go back to the next sheet, perhaps 2.2. That's good, right there. So in this particular case, this is an existing fairway that under today's condition wraps up around. These are trees that were planted back in about 78. And these are pine trees that have grown up over time. They get a little thinner over here with some deciduous trees, and this would be a small amount of clearing that would be required to basically facilitate this alternate alignment of the golf hole.
But I think we were just talking about 1900.3 adjacent properties. Yeah, so in the middle of the course, I'm not.
Okay.
So then again, if we get that defined where the cut limits are, then that means no development can happen outside that, which kind of by default covers the setback, because it's going to be, there's probably no clear interpretation of what setback to apply. So that way we don't have to deal with it because we're protecting and defining.
Well, but the
what can be done.
setbacks apply on all property edges.
10% of half a mile for that back there? Isn't that the one that might apply?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, exactly.
Well, I think
And then
the
other part of the discussion
setbacks.
is what you consider a structure. Is a cart path a structure? Is a tee a structure? And I'm inclined to agree with the interpretation that David indicated in his letter at the time. Besides the fact that it's supported by some previous decisions, as far as driveways and cart paths go.
I think we're combining two different staff comments. It might be easiest just
Yeah, we are.
to approve them one at a time.
Okay.
And we were talking about the staking of the clearing as applying to 1900.3, right? E, yep.
And I think, but we were in agreement on that,
Yes.
weren't we? Okay. As articulated by Mark. So then next,
So it looks like,
I'm sorry, 1900 3.G.
Yeah.
I forgot all about that particular item. So that's concerning the bicycle racks.
yeah.
Interestingly, at the last application, it got approved without the discussion, but we knew it was going to be coming up tonight as far as where to locate and how to locate and what the conditions of that particular use, partial use of the town's public rights-of-way would be. So, Kate, if we can go to 2.7A, then we can re-hone in on that area to allow the board to better visualize what's being proposed. Yeah, one more. There we go. So one of the challenges that has always burdened the golf course at this particular north entrance, this is the south entrance to the parking lot, this is the north entrance, and the more popular one is that anytime there was a large vehicle that parked in these particular parking spaces, it was very difficult to see oncoming cars. So the new ownership basically said, well, we've got to fix that. And what they wanted to do, what they are proposing to do, is actually stripe out this first parking space and have a bicycle rack placed there. And then these next two spaces would be small car parking only. So what we're trying to do is improve sight lines as you're basically moving out of the property and seeing those southbound cars on Spear Street. Now, with regard to the use of that particular area, you can see the rights-of-way line. That's the long dash and double dot line here. That basically is the rights-of-way line. And if we zoom in on a little bit here, there is a retaining wall that's on the golf course property, but it's just outside, just inside the rights-of-way line there. And when we met with Paul Goodrich and spoke with Ann Janda, we came up with in the field a number of proposed conditions on how that would be implemented. And from a safety standpoint, there's an existing utility pole right here. And Paul said, make sure that wherever this bike rack is, it's not in the westerly or outside of the westerly edge of where that pole is. It's a natural place for vehicles not to meander into. So it represented a very good benchmark for at least understanding where a bike rack could go versus not go. Now, keeping in mind that this is a seasonal facility, I believe we came to the agreement that this particular bicycle rack should be able to be removed out of the public rights of way and placed out of the area that's plowed. Paul used to plow that regularly. He hasn't done it in the last few years, but he said, if I wanted to go back there, I don't want that to be in the way. So that made sense. We just need to make sure that the bike rack is firmly fixed to the ground during the golf season and that we can basically remove it once the season is over. Other things that we recommended was making sure that the bicycle rack was properly colored, orange, red, or some other safety color coupled with reflectorization so that if anybody was in that area at night that they would at least see that particular feature. Kate, there was a letter that came from Public Works to that effect.
A letter that came from Public Works, it was in your application?
Oh, I'm sorry. So, okay, when I read your staff report, I thought they might have just took our language and put it in their own letterhead, but I didn't see a letter, so I thought I'd ask the question. But in our letter to Kate, it outlines the proposed conditions for the implementation of that bicycle rack system. And we'd have to have the capacity for 10 bicycles. That represents 10% of the total parking on the property.
So, sounds like this has kind of been figured out.
So you're testifying that Ann's okay with it and Paul's okay with it?
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Next.
The only other comment that kind of repeated through the staff report is just if there's any additional water needs.
Oh,
because of this
good question. So one thing that Kate picked up on is that we are served by both municipal water and sewer. And one thing that is very sensitive at the water department right now is anytime when somebody wants or needs additional water, especially on Spear Street. And in this particular case, again, because we have an 18-hole golf course and we're going to hope to return into or maintain an 18-hole golf course, we didn't see any change in demand on water usage associated with this particular facility. So the answer for the board is that we do not foresee an increase in water demand for this particular property.
All right.
And I think we discussed just about everything else.
I mean, the parking you mentioned as well earlier.
Kate?
Yep.
In 1910.4B, talking about residential district on 3 sides of the property, a lot of the conversation's been about Beaver Creek. I noticed in the southwesterly.
So Kate, if we can go to one of the overall plans, that'll help us frame the discussion.
Okay.
Getting close. That one is not as busy, doesn't have the ortho photo in the background. This one does. And so again, the golf course property basically runs here. And as far as residential uses, this is the Beaver Creek neighborhood. We talk about being on the east side of the golf course and south side here.
Right. And
Over here is Chris Farrington.
Okay.
And we met with Chris actually about potentially using a portion of his property, and he was amenable for a small portion, but ultimately we decided to keep everything on property. On the north side is the existing practice facility.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you move in the westerly direction, technically it's still golf course today. Someday it'll be residential. Right down here, just lost his name.
Mr. Caldwell.
I'm sorry?
What used to be Mr. Caldwell's?
Yes, used to be, yeah, fair enough. Yes. Oh, thank you, Mr. Newton. He lives at that particular location. This is the old Caldwell house. Over on this particular side, you have the maintenance facility,
Right, I'm
and then
thinking about across the,
down here.
yes.
Yep. So it doesn't show very well here, except this is the very southerly end of the golf course property. And these are some fairly deep residential properties that don't have homes nearby, but are residential.
Okay.
As well as the trailer park is off of the southwest quadrant, kind of right in here. So there's the house that's closest to the golf course
Okay.
under today's conditions. And right now, this is the Monroe Brook corridor that basically separates the golf course activities from
From those
these
homes.
residential homes until you get on the upper plateau here, at which point we're across the brook, but there's, not to say that this will always be the case, but under today's conditions, a pretty good buffer and no change of conditions from there also.
Okay.
And all those neighbors were notified, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
So I guess the only thing is that, what's a structure, what's a building, what's a setback?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me to be kind of unfair to,
So
to
if I can
require
just
it
jump
to-
in, another way out on the cart paths is that under today's conditions, if you were to consider it to be a structure, it is located the existing cart paths are located well within the 268-foot side yard setback. So then the next question comes up is an expansion of a non-conforming structure, is what's being proposed consistent or making it no worse than what is today's conditions? And when we go and take a look at, the activities around the golf course, as far as the proposed paths, I think you find that all of them are located inward of what is the worst case that either occupies this particular portion of the course or this particular portion of the course, and would be one way out if you needed to, as far as at least dealing with the path. That's extreme, but nonetheless, I just thought I'd give you the tools in the toolbox.
could you outline kind of where cart paths are now as opposed to proposed? I mean, just so we can have a sense of, like, within the frontage.
I'm trying to think which plans best cut to the chase on that one for you, Jeff.
I'm just trying to get a sense.
Could you identify the new cart
Oh, sure.
paths versus the old?
If you want me to highlight it.
I think you do. Yeah,
That's
I
easy.
see it.
Yep.
I mean, at least with the new ones on the north easterly part of this, if we're defining the setback as the area that's depicted as being cleared, they all fit within that area, right? I mean, so.
By definition.
Right.
So that's something we'll have to deliberate about.
Right.
Jeff, I won't mark up yours, but I'll mark up this one to reflect where the proposed cart paths are.
Where the dotted lines are, Dave? The dashed lines along the cart path, so those the,
I don't think it's going to be on that one.
okay.
Yeah, there's some
I just-
that are dashed and some are solid.
Oh, those are probably gonna be eliminated.
So the dashed
Oh,
ones are
yeah,
eliminated.
So Mark, maybe not dashed, that's actually a solid line that reflects the two edges of the new cart
Okay.
path.
Oh,
And
yeah.
where there's an existing cart path, there's no black line on
Right,
it.
right.
Right.
So maybe that's the best way to
That's the
describe
best way, yeah.
the
Right,
situation.
the new has the heavy.
The black
Yeah.
outline.
No, there's no line there.
Yep.
So this has a dark border, so this is new from here to there.
So the heavy,
Oh, I see.
To there.
the heavier solid lines are new.
And they're connecting
In
to
with-
things that already exist.
Okay,
Okay.
I see.
Okay, so we have that there. What, did we decide about the stormwater? Do we want to wait? Pardon?
We talked about deliberating on that, I thought,
Okay.
or maybe.
I mean, maybe that's what we need to do is have
Yeah.
a deliberative session.
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, how do I do that, Caitlin?
Oh,
We
you
have an
would
option to
move,
deliberate in public, or we have an option to deliberate offline?
I just think, well, it is getting quite late, and I feel as if I need to go and look at it again.
I need to, I appreciate it a little bit more.
so you would want
Or we
to
continue.
move to finalize the record, close the hearing, and enter into deliberative session.
No, the people have to talk. Public has
You
to
have to
talk.
give the public, you have to ask the public if they have any comments.
Okay, yep, does anybody else, does anybody have anything to follow up on what's been discussed? I mean, nobody stood up at the beginning.
Get sure, because everyone's here.
Sorry?
I was just making sure since all these folks
I
are
know
here.
there's people here who said anything, but, no? Nobody wants to add anything? Okay. So then are we at a state where we close?
I think so.
Yeah, if there's no other testimony, we might as well close it, and we can deliberate whenever.
Okay. So it's finalizing the record and closing the hearing. Right, so then I will make a motion to finalize the record for application SP 18-03 and CU 18-01 and close the hearing. I don't.
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have to take more time to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Oh, Joanna,
Yes.
you're going to want to make a motion to enter into deliberative session.
I will make a motion to enter into deliberative session on this matter.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Sometime.
That's fine.
Yes. So does anybody have any other business?
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
I think we just have to sign, look at decisions.
Okay,
Just a decision.
and the card.
We have
Okay,
to
so,
adjourn, right?
so then I'll make a motion to, is it?
Do we have one of those for the,
Where's my?
that we entered as, in as exhibit?
She's got it here, the one with the exhibit.
With the
A
exhibit,
written on it?
yes. I shouldn't have taken it apart. This is-
No, you do, you want to take it apart because you want this on away.
Does what?
This one's not,
gets
really
on
part-
the
this
ones-
one's already in
Well,
evidence.
okay, fine. He
Yeah,
handed them
that's already part of the
us
record.
both.
Oh, this one is?
Are y'all in?
No.
We're gonna adjourn.
No, we are, I'm making a motion to adjourn the meeting, close the
Second.
meeting, whatever the phrase is. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye.